while we work through the video difficulties. And it's good we have a Lord who doesn't get rattled by things the way that we can. Isn't that good? Even what's going on in the world, he does not get rattled. He knows what's going on and what will be coming. And Stan is going to open our meeting in prayer this morning.
Let's pray. Dear God, creator of heaven and earth, the creator of the whole universe, of all the creatures and all the humans, today we ask you to be here with us and give us the answers to our questions, and give us your wisdom. And here in design science, let us clearly see the design behind the science and behind the nature, and moreover to see you as a designer, the designer of the whole universe and the life and all the complexity in this life. We hear and we ask you to be with us and guide us with your Holy Spirit. In the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Thank you, Stan. And Creation Encounter has been busy this summer and a little bit into October, hoping for a bit of nice weather to go yet. And Keith has an update for us.
Thank you. Probably you're familiar with Creation Encounter. Creation Encounter was started by John Hergenrather and Dennis Bachavoy a few years back, and it was separated from DSA, but has come under the umbrella of Design Science Association. So it's really the DSA field trip arm. We've had some good field trips recently, but we've also had some difficulties with the restrictions and so forth. So we're trying to get back on our feet and get going in a little more vigorous way. We have 2 field trips remaining this year. And to get the dates right, it's Monday, October 18th. I'm going to be doing a trip called Cascade Conifers. We're going to meet at John Hergenrather's house in Hood River and learn how to use a dichotomous key, just a device for identifying the conifer trees of the Mount Hood National Forest. There's 18 species there. And then we're going to go out into the forest and practice our skills and actually do some identification. So I think that should be fun. We've done that trip before, and it's worked out well. The second trip is Friday, October 22nd. I'll be taking a group up on the Salmon River Trail out of Zigzag, and we'll be doing a forest ecology mini course, similar to what I teach at Multnomah University. So both of those trips are wide open. We can take about 20, 25 people on each, and we have, as of yesterday, nobody who's signed up, partly because we've had computer problems and the website has been down, but now it's up and working. So anybody who's interested in registering, it should be easy to get to. You just go to creationencounter.com, I believe. I just Google Creation Encounter and it comes right up. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Keith. And the Mount St. Helens Creation Center has the new Dinosaur and Fossil Museum open. If you've not been up there, you'll want to check that out. And the center has some new flyers or rack cards, which are very attractive. And we will actually pass those out now down the aisles. And if you're interested in creation science and you'd like to get involved actively somehow, there is an opportunity at Mount St. Helens Creation Center serving as a volunteer docent. A docent is a guide, as in a museum, and simply email the center at the address on there. And we will have a couple of announcements afterwards, but we're going to start with our speaker very soon. And Joel, are you about ready to? Okay. As Joel comes up, let me give you just a quick preview of one other quick announcement afterwards. There is an Institute for Creation Research conference next month in Battleground. We'll have additional details later in the meeting. It kind of crept up under our radar for getting on the DSA newsletter, but should be a really great, worthy conference. More details about that later. And for the time being, Joel came very prepared with a projector, but we have some video problems, so we're going to enjoy hearing him. And Joel has been teaching science since 2000. He taught for a period of time in a formal classroom setting. I'm sure that was exciting, right?
I taught in elementary schools
Okay.
for a while.
And then he moved outside to direct outdoor school programs on the Oregon coast. And after nearly 10 years, he started Glenn's Gizmos. If you've not heard of Glenn's Gizmos, it's a great resource for homeschool students. He started that alongside his wife, Roxana, and they've been blessed to travel and teach together. And they started the homeschool hubs in Vancouver and Vancouver and Newburgh. And kind of a contrast from that classroom setting, they now serve homeschoolers and beyond with classes, boat trips, scuba diving, videos, outdoor school programs. It sounds like a great contrast to that classroom setting. So
Yeah, it's
thank
been
you.
great. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, thanks for having me. We do have a little bit of technology trouble, but that's okay, because today has been a day of flexibility since early this morning for us. I don't know what it is with the weather, but every single time I'm scheduled to speak somewhere, some major weather thing happens this year. The last one, I was supposed to be speaking and working with a homeschool conference, and that was the day it hit 119.5 degrees at our house, and we own a little farm with a lot of produce, so that kind of threw our plans into disarray. But today, after not raining for like 6 months or something, in Oregon, which is unheard of, it decided to downpour and storm when we were going out with a boat to get critters on the Oregon coast. So go figure. So we changed gears. We were up early this morning, headed out into the ocean to bring in some live critters for you for marine biology, which we often do. But between the storm and the amount of time we had left, by the time we got there through all the rain, it was 5:40 a.m., and we called the trip off at the boat launch. So we are changing gears a little bit for you right away. So it's still something that you're really going to love, and the kids are really going to love as well, because I tend to teach for kids, because that's my job. And so I'm going to teach a lesson for kids, which some of you adults I think will enjoy anyway, because a lot of us are kids at heart still. But also, it may be that you gather some ways to share somewhat complex ideas in really simple ways from me, which could be really helpful when you're talking with kids. And so those are things we're aiming for today. We're going to be talking, instead of marine biology, I'm going to be talking about mammals with you. So we're going to be talking about skins, skulls, and tracks today, which are fun topics to be able to share, and the design that's evident within that. And so those will be great things. Now, of the different things we have a lot of materials. So our business, which does science education, we used to travel into big school districts and run private outdoor schools for private schools, homeschoolers, and public schools, all of those. Obviously, the shutdown has majorly impacted our business. And God has provided for us, though, and we're now donor funded. And because of that, we actually aren't going to switch and go back to the public side of what we did as a business. Because the donors that are funding us and the way God is providing is for us to work with homeschoolers and be much more direct in our communication of God as creator. And so that's a really exciting thing for our business to be able to do that. We operate a network, and a lot of what we do now is connecting other ministries with homeschool families and providing resources to families here in the Northwest and beyond. The online network that we operate is like a very simple version of Facebook without all the drama and politics, which is great. And to serve a very direct purpose of actually building healthy relationships and connecting people and ministries without making a ton of money off of all of those connections. And that's our goal, is to bring people together around the cause for home education and a Christian home education, to bring people to Christ and to keep kids within the church and connected with Jesus. And so those are really our goals. That said, we do have a network, so if any of you operate ministries that you'd like to connect more with younger families, we operate a homeschool hub network online that you are welcome to join. You can always reach out to me and ask. And that network at homeschoolhub.org we started it about a year ago. It now has almost 1,700 families who homeschool in this area in it. And so those are centered around Portland and Vancouver, all of them within a 2-hour driving time. So homeschooling is a growing movement, and it's grown a lot in the last couple of years. I don't know how many people will stick with it. A lot of them are doing it because they don't have another option that they trust or that's convenient anymore. And so we'll see. But I hope a lot of them find that they love it and stick with that as an option because it is a great educational option for kids and for families. All right, so I'm going to first read you the theme book to this last year. Are you ready for this? So the Bible, of course, is a great guidebook, and it is the directions for life, right? But this, I think, is the theme book for 2020 and 2021 specifically, right here. And so this is the upside down, inside out, backwards, oopsie daisy book. Have any of you ever read this book? Perfect. You're going to love it. Here we go. It does have fun pictures. I'm going to have trouble showing them to you. You can always look at them afterward. But I will try up here. So, God made everything just right, like nighttime dark and daytime light. But what if everything turned round and right side up was upside down? If right side in turned wrong side out and forward took a backward route, what kind of world would we find then? Well, turn the page and let's begin. The sky's not blue, but creamy yellow, and Mr. Sun's a square blue fellow. The clouds are brown and water's pink. Skunks smell sweet, but roses stink. Since clouds are brown, they don't hold water, but dirt and mud rain down together. The grass is orange and goats are red, and trees grow down, not up instead. A snake flies past a walking bird. This whole idea is quite absurd. Lions that squeak and mice that roar, and bears with feathers swoop and soar. White is black and black is white. We work at night and sleep in light. Is that sounding like this last year yet? Pigs have beaks and birds have snouts. Outs are ins and ins are outs. Rainbows smile instead of frown, and gravity pulls up, not down. People walk on hands, not feet, and candy's sour, but medicine's sweet. Pink flamingos turn lime green, redbirds change to purple sheen. Horses fly while eagles walk, and kangaroos have learned to talk. Dogs meow and kittens bark, and nothing's nicer than a shark. Zebra's stripes go rainbow wild. Baboons are tame, but folks are wild. So people live inside the zoo, and monkeys point and stare at you. Cows give root beer in big pails. See, it's not all bad. Fish have fur, and ducks have scales. People's skin is aqua blue. I don't know what to think, do you? And then whatever would we do if you were me and I were you? It seems to me that we can be quite content with what we see, where skies are blue and grass is green and raindrops wash the world so clean. That's appropriate for today. God knows everything he does. He knows just what to do for us, like sending Jesus, his own son, to share his love with everyone. I'm not at all surprised, are you, that God knew just what he should do? He made our world exactly right. Just look at the amazing sights. And so that's a really fun book to be able to share with families and kids. Apart from just being a fun read, it really applies today. And you know, it was not written particularly recently. This is an older book that's been around a while, so it's fun to bring it out now. But one of the things that I've spent a fair amount of time with kids now on is this idea that God is steady and he isn't changing, right? And he has all these plans in place and he's designed things already in place so that we can depend upon him for things. And so When we're talking about that, one of the things that I often do, and I'm not going to do it in here because of the carpet, and sometimes I do miss, is I tell them that I'm the world's worst juggler, and I'll sit there and juggle raw eggs for a while. And then I'm okay at it, so I usually don't hit anyone. And then I'll let a few fly out into the audience somewhere. And I spared you that today. But I like to talk with kids about how before anything was created, God had to put in place a lot of the rules that govern how things operate. Things that don't reproduce and have no genetic material, right? And so things like laws of gravity, the laws of motion, things that govern how energy transfers, all of those things that we don't see that we take for granted every day really had to be in place before anything else could be done. They're the foundation. And the rest of science has no way to explain how all of those laws and rules came about and why they're so repeatable and why we are able to understand them so well as we do. That's an amazing thing. And there's been lots of scientists who have really puzzled over that over the years. Lots of very famous scientists and great quotes over that. And so I often will start out talking about that. But what I'm going to do today now is I'm going to jump into talking about mammals, which will be fun. We have a lot of stuff we're going to look at. And the stuff that we're looking at, we can pass some of that stuff around if you want to. And if you're uncomfortable with that, just let somebody know to kind of bypass you, and it can spin around you instead of going through your hands, and that'll be okay. But we have a lot of different skulls and skins and furs we're going to look at and talk about how those things point to a creator and to an amazing design, how they point to God. And so that'll be a really fun thing, I think, for us to do. All right. So first off, let's talk some about some skulls, shall we? So there's different types of animals that live at different times of day and night. And most people are pretty familiar with that, right? You've got your diurnal animals that live are active during the day and sleep at night, and you've got your nocturnal animals that are awake at night and sleep during the day. There's also kind of a third group which kind of blends the two called crepuscular, right? Those are things like deer or raccoons. They get up when it's going dusk or getting brighter outside. They like to kind of live on the edge of those times. And those are the ones that unfortunately often end up as roadkill. And so I've gotten a lot of skulls of them over the years. And then one of the ways that you can tell kind of when an animal lives is looking at the design in the face of the animal and looking at the eyes. So if an animal has particularly large eyes, like, you know, this little bobcat here with pretty big eye sockets, or like an owl with big old eyes versus a hawk, for example, or even some of these other critters here, like right here, we have a very small little otter skull. And this little guy here has very small eye sockets. And so one of the things you can look at is how much light comes into the eye, right? Like a big reflective telescope. It needs a huge amount of space to capture that extra light at night, so they need really big eyes. And so that's one of the things we talk about. But also, talking about eyes, it's important to recognize where eyes are on the face, right? First off, we have two of them. Why do we have two eyes? Why do we have two of a lot of things? That seems kind of odd. Why don't we just have one, right? Like one eye right here and one giant nostril and one mouth. Well, we're good on that one, I guess, already. And one ear maybe down here. I don't know. I guess then all you do is hear yourself talk, though. But why do we have two eyes? Well, redundancy is helpful, right? It's kind of like, why do you want to drive with two headlights most of the time in case one goes out, right? Is one reason. But also, when you have two of something, you can triangulate the position of something and tell where it is relative to where you are. So I'm going to take this little bobcat skull and pass this one around for now. Yeah, start it off on one end. And again, if you want to handle it, go for it. Another option would be if you're concerned about handling something that other people are handling, you could wash your hands real good with soap and water right after this, and you'd probably be okay. But I'll leave it up to you to decide how comfortable you are with that. So one of the things we do with two eyes, and this is a great example of it, is if you take your thumb, put your thumb out here and give me a thumbs up, way out at the end of your arm, right? Now what I want you to do is bring it towards your face and stare at it with your eyes. And as it gets closer, along with getting a little fuzzier, it also makes your eyes go really cross-eyed, right? Great. Now turn to a neighbor and do that towards a neighbor while they're watching you. And then switch. So as we go cross-eyed, our brains are so amazing that the more cross-eyed we are, the more we recognize something is close to our face, right? We humans rely on our visual sense quite a bit. Most of us do. And so the more cross-eyed we are, the closer something is. Animals that tend to be predatory in nature, that have to catch fast-moving prey, tend to have eyes on the front of their head, because often they are visually oriented, right? They're going to catch something based on their eyes. Now, there's some animals that don't, like, let's see. Let's find a good one here for you for that. Over here. This animal here has eyes which are way out on the sides of its head, right? And this animal is a deer, and so it's able to see almost entirely behind it. So it's concerned with early detection of other animals, like predators, but it's not so concerned with the grass right in front of its face, because a deer really can't even go cross-eyed down here, right? Well, that's okay, because deer, they don't have to chase something down very fast, because grass doesn't run very fast, right? So they're pretty good. God made them just right for what they need. They need to detect predators, but since they're a prey animal and an herbivore, they have eyes out on the sides of their head. And then there's a few other critters, too, that are like that. Most of the ungulates, the animals with hooves that are herbivores, have those eyes out on the sides of the head. Most of them. So eyesight is one thing that's kind of fun to play around with, the idea of how that works, just with eye placement and size of those sockets. Another thing that is interesting to note, and I don't have a great example of it up here, but two nostrils for some animals actually allows them to be able to tell where a smell comes from, right? So they can chase down a smell a little faster. Some scientists actually think that's why hammerheads can be first on the scene if there's blood in the water often, because their nares, like nostrils, right, are way out on the ends of their hammer, so they can triangulate a position faster. They can tell which direction. There's another sense we have, too. We have the five senses, right? We have five senses, and those five senses, they allow us to interact with the world around us and take stuff in and also find food and things, right, to access resources. So another sense we have is ears, and ears are also in double, which may give you a clue that they can also triangulate position, right? And this is something that when a little baby is a baby, they are learning this because our brains are built so incredibly that they can learn how to grasp at things and they can learn how to tell where sound is coming from. So here's another experiment for you. Ready? We're going to test your ears. I'm going to have everyone in here close your eyes. I'm going to walk somewhere else in the room and I'm going to make a noise. And I want you to point without opening your eyes. And we'll see how close you are. After you point, you can open your eyes and see if you got it. But you got to keep pointing wherever you started, right? Here we go. Okay, open them up if you're pointing and see how you did. Most of you got it pretty close. There's a little echo if you're on the walls. You may have had a bit more of a challenge. But your ears can triangulate position too, because sound takes a little while to travel through the air as a compression wave. That means it's going to hit one ear a little bit before the other ear, right? And as soon as that happens, your brain instantly knows how far off that sound is coming, right? Which direction. That's amazing. It also explains why ears are not particularly helpful underwater for a lot of creatures, because sound travels a lot faster in water because it's denser. So ears are another one of those fun things. So we've covered that, we covered sense of smell, and by the way, things like a dog, they have so much extra space in there for sensing things with smell, it's amazing. We may look at them in just a second. But to start with, next, I want to talk about brains, okay? So we're going to talk about how smart is an animal? Now we know that animals and people are pretty different, right? Some scientists like to try to group them all together and say that, people are just another sort of animal. Well, the fact of the matter is, we're pretty different than animals in a whole lot of ways. and different than other mammals. But one of those areas is our brain. But of course, the biggest reason as a Christian that I think we're different is because we have a soul, right? We have a conscience and a soul, and we seem to understand things that animals certainly don't seem to understand in the world. And so these two animals, though, are ones that you often would find perhaps on your back porch. So right here, I have a raccoon, right? And raccoons are known to be pretty smart. Have you heard stories about raccoons opening things? They do that, that's for sure. They get into your garbage, they can open locks of different sorts sometimes, they can do all sorts of stuff that's very irritating whenever you're trying to keep them out of it. They also know how to wash their food and use some tools here and there. And I remember living at the coast where you have those gigantic banana slugs, you know, that are behemoth-sized. And the raccoons grab those and they eat them. But they don't like all the slime, so they'll roll them across your back porch to roll the slime off, and then they slurp them up. So raccoons are smart, we know that. Well, it turns out they have a really big brain for being such a small animal. Look at that brain cavity. You can even look in here right where the spinal cord goes when this comes around. I want you to compare it to another animal. This is an animal that's about the same size, but an entirely different beast. This is a possum, right? Now, a raccoon has a brain that's, well, I don't know, big. A possum's brain is smaller than my pinky tip. It's about the size of a pea when you look at it. And so God gave these two animals very different capacities for thinking, didn't he? And for solving riddles and things that they need to solve. And it becomes really obvious why one is super frustrating to us getting into our garbage and why the other one is just frustrating if they stumble across something. So we'll take those around and take a look. All right. Okay, let's take a moment and talk about dogs and cats, shall we? Who doesn't like dogs and cats? Okay, we got to take a little poll in here. Who are the cat people? Who likes cats more than dogs? Who are the dog people? You love dogs. Ooh, I think cat people, you are outnumbered in this group. Okay, who's kind of equal? They don't really have a preference. A couple of you? Yeah, this is a dog-loving group right here for pets. So right here is a canine from the dog family, the dog kind, and this animal is a coyote. There's also a couple other versions of dogs that I'm going to bring out. Let me see about this one. Yep. This is the skull of a domestic dog. Okay, and we're going to talk about how selective breeding of dogs has led to different skull shapes and stuff, right? To changes that appear to change within the animal's appearance, right? That's what we're going to look at here as well in just a second. But to start with, here's two different dogs. This one is a domestic dog. This one is a coyote. And they have these huge long noses with a lot of space inside, so they have a great sense of smell. They also have some eyes that point forward, but they're small-ish because they are mostly diurnal, right? And then, or crepuscular, right? They'd be hunting in those times. They have huge arches here where the muscle comes through and attaches to a sagittal crest on top. Anywhere you see flat bone surfaces, especially on a skull, is probably where a whole bunch of muscle is going to attach. Anytime you see ridges or flat surfaces, you're probably going to get some muscle attaching. So they have a really strong bite. This animal would be able to bite pretty good because it relies on an awful lot of muscle coming around. Has a pretty big brain. They're pretty trainable. And then they have some unique teeth. We're going to get into this in a little bit too. Different kinds of animals that eat different things. You probably know the three main ones that most people are familiar with, right? The three main groups like carnivore. What are the other ones? Herbivore, omnivore, right? And so you, I'm sure, know those. And so we're going to look at teeth in just a little bit too and pass them around for that. I use a combination of fake skulls that are plastic replicas that I pass around often with kids when I have whole groups of just kids because kids tend to pull out all my teeth. and then you have a skull with no teeth by the time it gets around the room, and you're wishing you still had them. But these ones have been glued in very well, but a bunch of these are real skulls that you're going to see today. So this animal here, being a dog, here's something that identifies it as a dog right away from a cat, right? There's 3 things that I'm going to look at on the teeth. Number 1, well, this is a trick question. This right here is called a canine tooth, right? But do other animals have teeth that scientists call canine teeth? Yeah, cats have them. We kind of have them. Even an elk has them in their upper lip. They're just like buried in their gums, but they have little teeth that scientists call canine teeth. So canine teeth don't necessarily mean they're a canine. That's kind of a bad representation of them, right, as far as that goes. Do they have big canine teeth? Yeah, but even bears have them. So behind that, though, this dog has some other specialized teeth. One right here that is pretty unique to dogs is a huge, gigantic tooth God gave it called a carnassial tooth. It is a tooth that's basically 3 teeth welded together, 3 teeth attached, one giant super tooth. And this is what dogs use whenever, if you have a dog and you've seen them chewing on a bone, and they turn their head sideways and they chew, right? And then they turn the other way and they chew, and back and forth. They're going back to this huge carnassial tooth, which God gave them just to grind up bone. And so that's pretty unique to them. Another thing that sets cats and dogs apart, right here on the front, you know how your teeth are rounded around the front? Well, you have teeth that are a little like the dog teeth here. They're nice incisors that are rounded up on front of their jaw. That's a round shape. That's a dog. A cat has straight teeth, like a razor. We're going to talk about that when we get out a cat here. And then another thing that sets cats and dogs apart is dogs are omnivores, herbivores, or carnivores. Let's see. Take a vote. If you say a dog is a carnivore strictly, raise your hand. If you think a dog is an herbivore, raise your hand. Okay, how about an omnivore? An all-eater, right? An all-consumer omnivore. Well, dogs are omnivores. That's why cat food and dog food aren't great for the opposite animal to get. They're balanced wrong for a different animal. So when you got cat food, that's almost all protein, right? That's meat products and proteins. When you got dog food, there's a lot of plant product in that. A lot of grains and other things often get mixed in. And so these are all eater animals. And when you look at them, they have the sharp teeth up front for slicing through meat. They have huge canines for grabbing onto their prey and holding it, right? Either to hold it or to hold it around the neck and suffocate it. And then they also have these flat teeth right at the back, a few molars, to grind up their food when they get something that isn't necessarily meat that needs grinding. And then they have those special teeth for chewing right through bone. That's pretty amazing. All those kinds of teeth in one jaw? We don't have that. We've got some incisors, some really underdeveloped canines, and some kind of boring molars at the back, right? That's all we got going for us. Still amazing, but I mean, that is an impressive mouth. Okay, this animal here, when you look at it, you got to be extra careful with it. This is the domestic dog skull. It had some tooth decay going on, so this poor dog probably had the worst smelling breath on the planet. You may have encountered a dog like that somewhere in your life. It's pretty memorable when you do. And so there was some serious gingivitis and tooth decay going on the back where the gums are. So you got to be extra careful of these teeth. They will fall out on you. But one of the things to note here, when this dog was selectively bred to become a domestic animal, they clearly have a higher brow up here, right, and a bigger brain area compared to the overall size of the animal, which is kind of unique. We're going to come back to this one just a second. For now, I'm going to pass this coyote around so you get a chance to look at it. Okay, now let's talk about evolution, shall we? So, we don't have any great examples of one type of animal evolving completely into another type, right? That really doesn't exist. I'm sure, being the group you're in here, most all of you are pretty aware of that. And we do, though, have good examples of, within a kind, minor adaptations which are pre-built into the genetics being able to change back and forth, like Darwin's finches, where you had genes that were already pre-programmed to be able to make small modifications to the beak shape to go back and forth depending on what food supply was available, right? Well, in the case of dogs, they've been raised for an awful long time, thousands of years, to be domesticated and selectively bred. And so people have been manipulating or toying with those genes for an awful long time. For some dogs, I'm not convinced it wouldn't be called animal abuse if people really thought about it, because there's some dogs that simply would not survive in the wild that survive because people keep them alive, right? Especially in their purebred forms, where we call them purebreds. In reality, though, modifications to genes usually don't help the animal out. And if you have an actual change to a gene, a mutation, those are almost always incredibly bad for the animal, right? They usually don't result in the animal improving. And that's one of the things that makes evolution between kinds of animals completely improbable, is because it just doesn't seem to happen, at least nowhere near a rate it would need to, not even close. And so right here we have a couple different dogs. This one is a standard dog. This is an English bulldog. I mean, it looks like Dr. Seuss went crazy with this guy, or maybe more appropriately, some writer of some horror novel series, because this animal has a serious underbite when you look at it. It doesn't even begin to line up, and this would be a purebred dog, right? But in reality, if this dog, this bulldog, was trying to survive in the wild, there's no way this would be able to compete against something like a coyote, right? And this is an example of a change within a kind, within the dog kind, but it's also an example of how this change is entirely unbeneficial to the animal. There's no way this would survive without people keeping it alive when you look at it. So I'm going to pass these two skulls side by side so you can look. You've got a severely underdeveloped sense of smell right here, right, when you look. You've got teeth that don't even begin to line up, not even close. You've got eyes that boggle out of the head, and I'm not quite sure how they stay in, actually, to be honest, looking at it. And very little muscle connection operating that jaw. All you've really got going for it is a real big brain. I don't know, I've never had a bulldog. Are they English bulldog? Are they really, really smart? I'm not sure, but that's the one thing that it does seem to have going for it. But we're going to pass those around so you can do a comparison right there on the spot. Great. Okay, let's talk teeth just a tad bit more here. So, we need to cover cats. We covered dogs. Let's talk cats for a second. So this is an example of a cat. This is a pretty big cat that we have around here. So this is a cougar skull. This one's a replica. But cats have those huge canines again. You see them right here. In fact, I need a volunteer. Is there a kid out there who's feeling brave? Come on up, somebody. Come on up. Do you want? You can too if you want to. I could have this bite both of you. I mean, whatever's going to happen. Okay, so what I want you to do is roll up your sleeve right there, please. And roll up your sleeve. Oh, you're already good to go. That's good. Okay, we're going to have you get a little feel of this. Now, I don't have nearly the biting pressure that this animal would have had when it's alive, which is a very good thing, right? It'd probably crush your bone. But we're going to have you feel this so you see which teeth hit first. Do you feel the teeth hitting you?
Yeah.
In fact, they're leaving little dimples. Oh, they're kind of white spots. Is that blood? No, just kidding. So they really can grab on, and this animal here could really bite down and hold because of those huge canine teeth, even though this is a cat, right? And what this animal would do if it was going after a deer or something is it wouldn't go for the arm, it would go for the throat, right? Until you really couldn't breathe anymore, and then it would suffocate you, and ultimately that would be what would do a deer in or prey animal for this cougar. Thank you, guys. So this animal has big eyes on the front of its head for hunting at night and in the dawn and dusk hours, right? So nocturnal and crepuscular. It also has those big canines. It's got a fairly decent sense of smell, a moderately large brain, but it has huge sagittal crests here for big muscle attachment. It also has a condyle that's in line with the teeth. We're coming back to that in the second half of our talk today, which will be good. And you can tell it's a cat for two reasons really give it away right away. Number one, sharp teeth all the way to the back of the jaw, right? This animal is a carnivore. It's only going to be eating meat. And then on the front, right between these canines, this is the dead giveaway for a cat, straight, flat teeth. Some people think that's because cats, like a cougar, after they make a kill, they don't want to eat all that extra hair. So they've been observed to actually shave their prey with those front teeth before they actually eat them for a section, they're going to bite into. I mean, that's pretty impressive right there. But those very flat front teeth instantly give it away as being a cat. Again, this is different than a dog. This is pretty different. And you know what? Anytime you find a cougar skull, you're going to be able to use those identifying characteristics and tell. And over time, this isn't going to change into a dog skull. This animal, even after lots of generations, stays a cougar, right? Stays a cat. All right. So let's pass that out for people to see it. For just a second, let's talk about what bone is, shall we? So some of you kids, and some of you adults, if you remember way back, right, are going to remember your parents telling you to take your vitamins. You may still be being told that by your spouse or your doctor or yourself, if you're wise, right? And get your minerals, drink your milk, those kinds of things that we're always told. Especially, though, when you're growing as a kid, it's really important because you start out with a cartilage type of skeleton within your mom, and that skeleton is soft and squishy, like your nose or your ears. That's really helpful, like when you're being born, because it can squish to different shapes as you're being born. But it also helps in that it's very flexible, and you may not break bones as easy at that point. You'll bend instead, which is super strange. But it seems to happen, right? And then up here, like on babies, you have skulls that are a little bit soft. They may have soft spots in different places. And that's because the cartilage skeleton is there, but it hasn't had minerals deposited onto it. As a person or an animal that needs to stand vertical, right, out in the air, grows, unless they're a shark, I suppose, where they keep a cartilage skeleton. But if you're standing up, you need a skeleton that can support your body as you grow. If you don't, it will break often, or you may have trouble getting around. So throughout that time, minerals are deposited onto your cartilage skeleton. That's a great plan. And when you look at a bone like this, sometimes you can even tell the age of it based on the color or how thick the mineral deposits are on the bone. This one is the shoulder blade of a person, and it's a real bone. So if you ever wondered what a bone looks like inside of a person exactly, this is one that came from a person who gave their body for science. And so we have this one that we'll pass around. You can take a look at it if you want to. Just be very gentle with it. It's quite fragile in the middle here, right? And so we need to not push on it real hard in the middle. But that's a bone that's very much like your own bone, because you have a skeleton and skull similar to a lot of these animals. Now, just because God reused a plan or a design piece in a different model, right, in a different thing or a different creature, doesn't necessarily mean that that creature evolved from the first one. You got that? That's important to realize. Because any kind of person who's designing something, or any artist, is going to reuse ideas that work well. That's how a smart mind works, right? So you can always identify artwork by seeing characteristics that are similar for the artist, and then you could say all of those are the same artist, right? That painted all those paintings. They're all the same. They all have light that's painted the same way. Their brush strokes all look really similar. They're reusing something that works really well for them, that they know works. Well, we would expect that. If God designed all the creatures around the world, we would expect him to reuse great ideas that he has that utilize the laws already in place, like laws of motion or how force works. And so even though our skulls have some similarity to other animals, we would expect some of those things to be reused by a creator and intelligent mind. Now, kids, some scientists who claim to be doing good science, they claim that we evolved because maybe a part of our skeleton looks similar to an animal, right, to some other animal. But that doesn't make any sense to me, because if I was an intelligent designer of something, I would design it the same way once I had something that worked well. Got it? So we're going to pass this around. Take a look at a human skull. This one is not real, by the way. If you're kind of creeped out by that, you don't have to worry. Although it might talk to you if you operate it just right. But this skull here has eyes on the front, like we talked about, a nose here. It's got these nice rounded teeth. You can barely even see that there's any canine teeth, and flat molars in the back, making us an omnivore. And then on the very back edge, the condyle is up high. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And look at that brain. Oh, we're different than all the other animals there. And so that's really an impressive thing that sets us apart in a lot of ways. So we'll send that. All right, are we at a good break time? Is it about time for a break? Okay. And then we'll come back together. We're going to operate this. In the second bit, we're going to talk about the remaining bit on teeth, rodent teeth. We're going to talk about condyle location of the jaw, the hinge right here, and we're going to try to experiment with leverage. And we're going to talk about skins and feet a little bit.
Great. This is really interesting. So we'll take a 15-minute break and enjoy some refreshments in the hallway out there, and beverages you can bring back in here if they have a lid. And then we have our book table and Mara Lee helping in back. So we'll resume in 15 minutes. If you did not get one of the Mount St. Helens Creation Center rack cards and new flyers, please see the book table and back for one of those, and we'll see you in 15 minutes. Thank you. preparing to collect some live marine biology specimens to pass around this morning. That would have been a little bit different than skulls, correct? As we return to our seats. But weather prevented them from bringing some live marine critters, and so there's only one thing we can do. We'll just have to have them back again. Very interesting. So thank you very much as we resume.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we were hoping to bring in those critters, but the storm is not so grand. We do boat trips for homeschoolers too, so we are just launching. It's a brand new thing we're starting because we operate the hub in Vancouver, which is a physical location also for homeschoolers, where we do education. And then we operate, and we're just starting one in Newberg, Oregon at a 130-year-old farm that we're remodeling into an education center for families. And so both those locations we're working towards, but we also in this last year started doing something we're calling Genesis Expeditions, where we're sharing about creation, but we're doing it in kind of a unique way where we're trying to find locations and events and activities that are entirely inaccessible to families otherwise, because they're either too difficult to get to without specialized knowledge or equipment, or just too expensive to access for most families. And so we're starting that out. We have 2 boats that we have rebuilt. The first one we are already operating with. It's an 18-foot rib boat, so like what the Coast Guard or the military would use with the inflatable sides and a full hull underneath for surf rescues. That boat we're taking out into Netarts Bay already, and we're doing trips there, learning about marine life on the bay and ecology right there on the bay and how that points to our Creator. We're doing that 1 to 3 families at a time, depending on family size. We can take out about 10 people at a time if they're adults. A couple more sometimes if they're really little, based on the weight we can handle in the boat. And then we are also right now remodeling. It's in our Newberg location, and we're getting close. We are remodeling a 28-foot aluminum pontoon boat to take up to the Hood Canal in Washington, which is a 300 to 600 feet deep canal on the left side of the Puget Sound. And that canal has a ton of very unique marine life in it. It's a great spot for scuba diving. And so we're doing 2 things with that. We are preparing, and we've been doing training for the last 2 years for some more technical-ish diving, where we'll be able to live stream high-resolution video and audio back to a boat and around the world to families on the boat. We'll be able to take up to 15 adults at a time on that boat, more if they're kids sometimes. And then we're also purchasing, and this is the piece that we're still waiting on, we are waiting on about $5,000 to $10,000 to buy a small commercial-grade ROV to put that, which is a remote-operated vehicle, so a remote submarine, that then we can have kids and students actually operating to do tasks underwater up to 500 feet down. And so that is the other piece we're working on. And that will actually allow us to do some fun research up there with students and with families and actually do research projects while we're out there. One of the things that we hope to do is the giant 6-gill sharks, which live very deep in the ocean, seem to have a life cycle, but nobody knows for sure, where they come back into the Puget Sound maybe every 10 to 15 years, and a new generation of them is born. And they're a huge shark that lives so deep we know very little about them. They were in 10, 15 years ago, and there's a great documentary about them that was made, other than the first 30 seconds of it, which I disagree with, which of course mentions millions and millions of years. But the rest of it is really quite fantastic. And so we hope to be able to actually bring those sharks in and be able to get down there with an ROV with students with these gigantic 6-gill sharks and do some study of them, which would be really neat. So those are other projects that we're working towards. Anyway, okay, I've got another book for you, I think, unless it got picked up. Right here. This one is more commonly known because it was it's won a couple different awards, so it's been in more libraries. And so I'm going to read this one to you next. Have you guys ever read the book Stella Luna? It's another cute book. And so I'm going to read this one for just a second with you, because there's a little lesson in here too, I think. You know, I don't think that the author exactly meant for it to be this lesson maybe, but it kind of screams it loud and clear by the end to me. So we're going to take a look at it. So this is about a little bat. In a warm and sultry forest far, far away, there once lived a mother fruit bat and her new baby. Oh, how Mother Bat loved her soft, tiny baby. I'll name you Stella Luna, she crooned. Each night, Mother Bat would carry Stella Luna clutched to her breast as she flew out to search for food. One night, as Mother Bat followed the heavy scent of ripe fruit, an owl spied her. On silent wings, the powerful bird swooped down upon the bats. Dodging and shrieking, Mother Bat tried to escape, but the owl struck again and again, knocking Stella Luna into the air. Her baby wings were as limp and useless as wet paper. Down, down she went, faster and faster, into the forest below. The dark leafy tangle of branches caught Stella Luna as she fell. One twig was small enough for Stella Luna's tiny feet. Wrapping her wings about her, she clutched the thin branch, trembling with cold and fear. "Mother," Stella Luna squeaked, "where are you?" By daybreak, the baby bat could hold on no longer. Down, down again she dropped. Flump! Stella Luna landed headfirst in a soft, downy nest, startling the three baby birds who lived there. Stella Luna quickly clambered from the nest and hung out of sight below it. She listened to the babble of the three birds. "What was that?" cried Flap. "What was that?" "I don't know, but it's hanging by its feet," chirped Flitter. "Shh, here comes Mama," hissed Pip. Many, many times that day, Mama Bird flew away, always returning with food for her babies. Stella Luna was terribly hungry, but not for the crawly things Mama Bird brought. Finally, though, the little bat could bear it no longer. She climbed into the nest, closed her eyes, and opened her mouth. Plop! In dropped a big green grasshopper. Stella Luna learned to be like the birds. She stayed awake all day and slept at night. She ate bugs, even though they tasted awful. Her bat ways were quickly disappearing, except for one thing. Stella Luna still liked to sleep hanging by her feet. Once, when Mama was away, the curious baby birds tried it too. When Mama Bird came home, she saw 8 tiny feet gripping the edge of the nest. "Eek!" she cried. "Get back up here this instant. You're going to fall and break your necks." The birds clambered back into the nest, but Mama Bird stopped Stella Luna. "You are teaching my children to do bad things. I will not let you back into this nest unless you promise to obey all the rules of this house." Stella Luna promised. She ate bugs without making faces. She slept in the nest at night, and she didn't hang by her feet. Stella Luna behaved as a good bird should. All the babies grew up quickly. Soon the nest became crowded. Mama Bird told them it was time to learn to fly. One by one, Pip, Flitter, Flap, and Stella Luna jumped from the nest. Their wings worked. "I'm just like them," thought Stella Luna. "I can fly too." Pip, Flitter, and Flap landed gracefully on a branch. Stella Luna tried to do the same. How embarrassing. Not so graceful. "I will fly all day," Stella Luna told herself. "Then no one will see how clumsy I am." The next day, Pip, Flitter, Flap, and Stella Luna went flying far from home. They flew for hours, exercising their new wings. "The sun is setting," warned Flitter. "We had better go home or we will get lost in the dark," said Flap. But Stella Luna had flown far ahead and was nowhere to be seen. The 3 anxious birds went home without her. All alone, Stella Luna flew and flew until her wings ached and she dropped into a tree. "I promised not to hang by my feet," Stella Luna sighed, so she hung by her thumbs and soon fell asleep. She didn't hear the soft sound of wings coming near. "Hey," a loud voice said, "why are you hanging upside down?" Stella Luna's eyes opened wide. She saw the most peculiar face. "I'm not upside down. You are," Stella Luna said. "Ah, but you're a bat. Bats hang by their feet. You were hanging by your thumbs, so that makes you upside down." The creature said, "I'm a bat. I'm hanging by my feet. That makes me right side up." Stella Luna was confused. "Mama Bird told me I was upside down. She said I was wrong." Wrong for a bird maybe, but not for a bat. More bats gathered to see the strange young bat who behaved like a bird. Stella Luna told them her story. You ate bugs, stuttered one. You slept at night, gasped another. How very strange, they all murmured. Wait, let me look at this child, a bat pushed through the crowd. An owl attacked you, she asked. Sniffing Stella Luna's fur, she whispered, You're my Stella Luna, you're my baby. You escaped the owl, cried Stella Luna. You survived? Yes, said Mother Bat as she wrapped her wings around Stella Luna. Come with me and I'll show you where to find the most delicious fruit. You'll never have to eat another bug as long as you live. What a relief. But it's nighttime, Stella Luna squeaked. We can't fly in the dark or we will crash into trees. We're bats, said Mother Bat. We can see in the dark. Come with us. Stella Luna was afraid, but she let go of the tree and dropped into the deep blue sky. Stella Luna could see. She felt as though rays of light shone from her eyes. She was able to see everything in her path. Soon the bats found a mango tree, and Stella Luna ate as much of the fruit as she could hold. I'll never eat another bug as long as I live, she cheered. As she stuffed herself full, I must tell Pip, Flitter, and Flap. The next day, Stella Luna went to visit the birds. Come with me and meet my bat family, said Stella Luna. Okay, let's go, agreed Pip. They hang by their feet and they fly at night and they eat the best food in the whole world. Stella Luna explained to the birds on the way. As the birds flew among the bats, Flap said, I feel upside down here. So the birds hung by their feet. Wait until dark, Stella Luna said excitedly. We will fly at night. When night came, Stella Luna flew away. Pip, Flitter, and Flap leaped from the tree to follow her. I can't see a thing, yelled Pip. Neither can I, howled Flitter. Aye, shrieked Flap. We're going to crash, gasped Stella Luna. I must rescue them. Stella Luna swooped about, grabbing her friends in the air. She lifted them to the tree, and the birds grasped a branch. Stella Luna hung from the limb above them. We're safe, said Stella Luna. Then she sighed, I wish you could see in the dark, too. We wish you could land on your feet, Flitter replied. Pip and Flap nodded. They perched in the silence for a long time. How can we be so different and feel so much alike, mused Flitter. And how can we feel so different and be so much alike, wondered Pip. I think it's quite a mystery, Flap chirped. I agree, said Stella Luna, but we're friends, and that's a fact. I like to read that book because it points out that God gives different creatures in his creation exactly what they need to survive. He gives them the ability to sense things that they need to be able to sense. He gives them the ability to find food that they need to survive and the body plan that they needed to survive in the niche that they're in for the purpose that he gave them. But I also like to read that book because it very clearly points out that bats are bats and birds are birds, and a bat can't become a bird, and a bird doesn't become a bat, right? And so I like it for that reason as well. And of course I realize that evolutionists don't necessarily say that one exactly became the other. They of course go around different ways to try to say that. But it very clearly points out to me that you have different kinds of animals who interact very differently with the world around them, and I think that's a great thing to share with people. All right. Teeth. Back to teeth. Speaking of different kinds of animals, this is one of my very favorite ones to share with people because most people don't realize this about this particular critter. So this one with these huge enameled orange front teeth, you probably recognize. Anyone got a guess? You got two animals that live here that this could be, but it's a pretty big skull. Yep. This one's a beaver. Yep. And, oh, do you? Oh, I'm going to show you something you may not know about it here. We'll see. So beavers have very unique teeth, right? They have flat molars in the back for grinding up the food that they eat, that cambium layer of bark, right, just under the bark of the tree, as well as all the reeds and rushes and tender shoots and things that they browse on along the edge of the water. But they also have those huge front teeth for chopping through trees and creating those dams and moving sticks around and logs, which then serves a very important purpose in the environment, right? So they aren't just about themselves. somehow God made certain animals so that they actually care for and do things in the environment that benefit other creatures as well, right? Everything is planned so perfectly. Beavers are one of those creatures. Beavers, though, are a very large rodent, and rodents have these huge front teeth, right? And these huge front teeth on a rodent, many people think a rodent's teeth are only that long, and people do learn, like if you've ever had a pet rat or a mouse or a gerbil or those kinds of things, you learn that they got to have stuff to chew on, right? You learn that pretty early, about the time they're either chewing on your finger or biting through the cage or any number of other things that they might be chewing on. And if they don't chew on things, these teeth keep growing, and they'll grow all the way around and create problems for them so they can't close their mouth correctly. Some of them, if they choose not to chew things correctly, like guinea pigs, sometimes with them, you actually have to take special clippers, like nail clippers basically, and clip off their front teeth to trim them. Otherwise, those teeth go all the way around, they can't shut their mouth correctly, and now, I'm not sure if it's true or not, but of course there's rumors about those teeth growing so long that they stab back into the animal at different points in the skull, right, and create problems that way too. I don't know if that's true or not. I've never had that happen with any of them I've owned, but the thing about the rodent's tooth is the tooth isn't just this, and it grows fast. It's actually this long. It comes way back here into the back edge of this jaw, into this mandible. And on a rodent, when you get that tooth loose, you can actually just pull it right on out. And it just keeps on coming until you get clear to the end of it. And then if you want to, you can put it right back in again, which is pretty fun to see. So we'll pass this around. When I do that, you have to be really gentle, though, because the back edge of the tooth, where it was growing more recently, is very fragile. The front end is the part that gets hard, right? And so we can very gently put that back and forth so you get a chance to take a look at that. It's kind of easier to imagine how that would really be a problem for this animal when you do that, isn't it? But what a unique tooth. And the way that God made this tooth to grow so fast, in some ways, I'm glad we don't have teeth like this, because can you imagine the constant gnawing? Oh my goodness. But at the same time, having a tooth that replaced itself completely within 2 weeks after it broke off at the gum line, that sure would be nice, and that would really save on the dental bill, right? So I can see that being a great thing too, both. We'll pass this around though, and you can explore this beaver skull here. You can also look at how flat the skull is and how thick the bone is. Turns out chewing through solid tree trunks requires some pretty thick bone. I guess that should be assumed. All right, let's have a little bit of fun. We're going to take a little survey now that we've talked about teeth some. You ready? This animal here has rounded front teeth. It has large canines. It has some teeth that are sharp, but mostly they're all flat in the entire jaw here. It has a pretty long skull, but not a thin nose with a big brow like a dog. And the eyes are forward on the skull, not back here, which is where you expect the canine eyes, right? And huge, huge spots here for muscle to come for a real strong bite. So, knowing what we know about the teeth, sharp up front, flat at the back, big canines, we're going to take a survey here. Herbivore, omnivore, carnivore, right? Okay, here we go. If you think herbivore, raise your hand. If you think omnivore, raise your hand. If you think carnivore, raise your hand. Well, it is eating some meat, but it's also eating some plants, right? If you look at this with these flat molars, it's probably grinding up some plant material that's difficult to chew. So this is a black bear, and it's an omnivore. It'll eat a little bit of whatever it finds, right? And especially as it gets towards wintertime and the season changes, like right now, they're going to start going into town and going through people's garbage and eating everything they can find because they got to stock up on that fat for the winter. So this animal has got a tremendously strong bite. There's one more thing we're going to look at in a moment. It's the location of the condyle, this joint, in relation to the rest of the jaw. It really matters for how strong that jaw is. All right, we could pass that one around. That's a relatively small black bear, yeah. Although most black bears are not huge. The really big ones that you see that are black bears tend to be around the national parks. and where people are constantly feeding them with their food by accident. And some of those areas, you even get the brown bears that aren't grizzlies, but they look a little like them because of how fat they are. Okay, here's the ultimate tooth. This one's a replica. I couldn't get a real one because it would be very expensive and or possibly illegal. So, this is a replica of an elephant's tooth. And so, this right here is where the roots would come down into the jaw. And this is the tooth up here for grinding that food. Can you imagine a jaw that holds that tooth? One tooth. That is a big molar. This is the ultimate in herbivore, right? Right there. So that we can pass around. Okay, let's grab a different one. This one, when it comes around, you don't have to worry. This one is a replica. You won't knock the teeth out, so you can play with the jaw, right? Which is good. The other thing is, since especially the mandible comes apart right here at the front, on most animals, many of them have that fused at the front, but on a real skull, it's got enough soft tissue and stuff in there that that connection is a little flexible, and it breaks really easy. So you always have to glue it back together with hot glue all the time. In this case, since it's a replica, you don't have to worry about that. In the case of snakes, it's not even connected up there. It's like having two separate arms that can move around on their own, which is pretty cool. So this one, we're going to take a little guess here. Herbivore, omnivore, carnivore. Front teeth, flat but rounded incisors up here. It does have the tiniest little canine tooth, but it's embedded in the gums. It's totally not functional for most anything as far as we know. It's just there because it's interesting, I guess. And then back here we have these very developed molars and a very loose condyle way up high, so the jaw's very flexible back and forth, right? So, herbivore, omnivore, carnivore. You ready? Herbivore. Omnivore. Carnivore. All right, flat molars mean it's probably eating some plant material, right? Because that takes a lot to chew up. There are sharp teeth at the front, but there's only, I forgot to point this out, there's only these teeth on the bottom jaw. So they would be pretty much useless for chopping through meat, right? That would be a rough go. And they point forward as much as up. So this one is an animal that grazes. It grabs food and rips it up on those bottom teeth. And this is very much like horses or cows or goats. Some of those kinds of animals eat in a similar way. This one is an elk skull. And the condyle is, again, what we're going to come back to. So when this comes around, look at where the joint is, and maybe try manipulating it on the skull up here so you can see how it moves, okay? That's going to become important in just a little bit. Look where it is here in relation to the teeth. If you drew a straight line from the teeth right across the bottom of the jaw, look at where that is compared to other skulls that have been passed. All right. An animal like that, by the way, is something called an ungulate. They are an animal that walk on their fingernails, basically. They're hoofed animals. They tend to be herbivores. They tend to rely on either stealth or moving extremely fast, right, to be able to get to where they're trying to go. So they avoid predators. Other animals, like dogs and cats, are something called digitigrades. They walk on their digits. It's like walking tiptoe everywhere you go when you're trying to walk real quiet. And often they even have special pads, and they have hair in between there to pad their footsteps, so they're very quiet. So think like bobcats and cougars. Those are kind of the extreme of that. And then there's animals that are plantigrade, which is like you and me. We're not very good at sneaking around, if we're honest with ourselves. And so in order to try to sneak, we try to walk on our tiptoes, and we look ridiculous. But it sort of works, right? And so a plantigrade animal is like us, or a bear, or a beaver. They tend to walk with more weight on the back of their foot, on their back foot, on their heel. And they're kind of noisy as they walk, and they're usually pretty slow moving. Raccoons also fit into that category. Okay, let's look at something with really weird feet. These are freeze-dried possum feet on sticks, because everyone needs freeze-dried possum feet on sticks. You do have to be gentle with the toes. Since they're freeze-dried, they could break off. But you can go on ahead and take a look at these. They took a little bit of damage before we got them from some beetles that got into this one right here, but those are gone now, so that's good. Possum have some really weird feet because they have this little like opposable thumb thing on their back foot, right, that they can use. And so somebody in here it was you. You were saying that your friend has a pet possum and it's actually rather intelligent, which surprised me. So, but that's great. I'm glad one is. But they have really awesome feet. Whenever it grabs you, have you ever felt its foot grab you and hold on? It holds onto your shoulders. Does it wrap its tail around you too a little? Because they have a slightly like prehensile tail too a little bit. Because they are, a marsupial, right? With a pouch and everything, and they wander around with about 12 babies that get about that big before they're weaned and off on their own. Anyway, we're going to pass these around so you get a chance to take a look at some really bizarre feet. A while back, I helped somebody preserve some beaver feet. And those were pretty fun, too. I'm going to have to find another roadkill beaver so I can preserve the feet myself. The last roadkill beaver I had access to, we ate. So, because, well, I don't know if it's even worth going. Hang on, let me look at the time to know if I need to go. Okay. While I'm getting out the next thing, I'll tell you about that. So it was the Pepsi delivery man's fault. He hit the beaver on the way to delivering Pepsi to the high school in Tillamook, Oregon. So the police were dispatched to put it out of its misery because it broke its legs. And then it was delivered to the high school fresh for purpose of study. So they cleaned up their tools real good because they'd heard that beaver was pretty tasty. So they got some regular knives for eating with, and they cleaned out some of it so they could save it separate. And then they did a full study on the beaver, which was really interesting. And it turns out beaver taste really good, if you ever wanted to know. They taste like the tender little green shoots, or like whenever you eat on grass and you've got the little joints that are so sweet in the grasses. That's what beaver tastes like. Really nice meat. But it's full of tendons. Be warned, it's like eating floss. Sweet floss. All right. Here's a bunch of different furs. We're going to talk about them for a moment here, which I think will be good. Right here we have a coyote. So this is a dog, right? And of these furs, you got the long guard hairs, you got the soft fur underneath. One interesting thing to note about how God designed animals, though, is a lot of them have a special sort of camouflage, where the belly is lighter colored and the back is darker colored, right? Maybe the best example of this in this collection of skins is here. This is also my very favorite feeling animal. This is a bobcat that's been cased, which means instead of being cut down the middle and spread out like this was, it was cleaned out from the front end and back end so that it's like a puppet, right, for stuffing or study later. And so some of them you can kind of wear. But this animal here has this beautiful fur on the back and a really soft belly that's all dappled and speckled. That's because if you're looking up at a bobcat in a tree, let's say, and you're a little mouse on the ground, you're looking up at the sky and you're seeing that against the tree, right? And then you're looking down from the tree and you're seeing that against the ground. So this type of camouflage allows this animal to blend in both ways. You even see this in fish, like in the ocean, or even like a trout. The back of them is darker and the belly's lighter, and you don't see them from the surface even if they're right there until they flash that belly a little bit, right? And that is an amazing thing. And coloration is really important to different animals, of course, to be able to blend in. It can also communicate different things, as is the case with this animal, which all of you will probably recognize right away. And so sometimes they communicate, if I stick my tail up, you better back off, right? With that tail and that pretty color. Or like a deer, where they have the white patch or a black patch with their tail that can signal other deer right away and is really visible. So we're going to pass a few of these around. We have a couple types of skunks here in the Northwest. I don't have a spotted skunk right now here, but this one is a striped one. The spotted ones, by the way, they're smaller, but and they go by different names sometimes. They're really cute looking. And then when they get ready to spray you, they do handstands. This is how I know God has a sense of humor. Because their most terrifying thing is to do handstands and dance around on their front feet. with their tail end up in the air and their feet up in the air on their hands. And if you ever see a skunk doing that, run. The only one we came across one time like that, it was at a kids camp, and it wandered in and tried to climb in with the kids sleeping under tarp shelters one night because they had a sleep out night. And this little baby spotted skunk, which had been orphaned somehow along the way or something, was trying to climb into the sleeping bags with all the kids to get warm because it was cold. And it didn't mean anything by it. It was pretty friendly. It finally curled up over by the fire pit, kind of in the fire pit where they found it in the morning, all curled up and huddled up, and then it went on its way. But the kids were not so sure about that all night. Here's another animal that communicates something with its tail, right? So this beaver has this real broad tail, which if it gets startled, it's going to slap that on the water super hard and startle you to death if it's in the middle of the night and you're out there in a canoe or walking along the edge. But that communicates to the other beaver, there's danger nearby, right? Dive and get out of here. So that's kind of a neat animal. And of course, beaver were so well known for their fur and their pelts, and so valuable with the fur trade, because they have that special guard hair on the outside and then the really nice soft hair on the inside to keep them warm. And it works almost like a dry suit for them and for otters, because it traps so much air in there. Between the oil that's in their fur and the air getting trapped, they can stay pretty warm, which is amazing. So why don't you pass those? This little guy here is a little gray fox. And this one, I think it's this one, comes from a special collection. Nope, this one doesn't. It's a different one that I don't have here right now. I have one of them that's out of Canada. That's a unique species from up there. But this little gray fox and this coyote, I think I'm going to pass the two of them around so you get to see a couple of dogs together. Yep, and canine as well. All right. There's a masked bandit for you. There's one of those raccoons. You can pass him. Sometimes they travel with a possum because they're fun to look at the pouches on them if they're intact. Okay, all of those, and this one. So these ones are rabbit furs, right? Rabbits are like one of those things that's kind of been held up by people who don't maybe understand science all the way as being something that, because they can change color, right, that points towards evolution between species somehow. And the reality is we've bred lots of different kinds of rabbits, all of the same kind, and they've always stayed rabbits. No matter the color of their fur, or the exact shape or size of them, or how tasty or not they are to eat, they remain rabbits. And we see that in nature because God built the ability to change somewhat to adapt to their environment right into their genes. They have the pre-built ability to change color for many of those rabbits based on what the season is doing, right? So snow to summer to fall, they may be able to change those fur colors. And that's a pretty amazing thing. So a lot of what we see that gets touted as evidence in our modern day for evolution that we can see with our very own eyes, so it must be testable, right, is actually pre-built into the genetic code and points towards an incredibly intelligent designer who had already had other plans in place for that animal. Oh, I didn't even get these ones. There's more. There come in so many of them. Okay, we can pass that one around too, and then let's pass this one around. This one is a small black bear. This black bear was shot when it was getting into town in Rockaway Beach, Oregon, back in the day, by my great-grandfather. So it's been around a while. And as with bears all over the place in the world, once they learn people have garbage, and it's easy to get to it, and we don't keep it locked up all the time, they make quick work of finding that and getting into it on a regular basis. And so that's what happened with this one. But it is a fun little bear to take a look at. Bears often get a bad rap, you know, and they seem really scary to people. But in reality, as long as they aren't tamed by people feeding them, accidentally or on purpose, they tend to keep their distance and be pretty safe, which is good. All right. That'll be good. I got one more fun thing to share with you here. And then some of these skulls are very small. So you're going to have to come up and look at them afterward instead of having me show you right now. Because they're very small rabbits and rodents and things. We're going to do this right here to end. This is a fun hide. I don't know if you knew this, but you can actually make clothing and tan salmon hides with vegetable tannin. So this is a vegetable tanned salmon skin, where you use that tannin to thicken the material that's already within the skin and thicken that up into a leather that you could actually make clothing and stuff out of, which is kind of fun. Most people don't realize that's possible. Okay, let's talk condyle location to close our time together. So there are a few different examples floating around out there. There's that big old elk that's going through right now. And then there were a couple like with the bear or the cougar. I'm going to pull up this one, that one. And then the most extreme example, but you're going to have to take my word for it on this one until you come up and look yourself, is a rabbit. All right. So you can also tell what an animal is planned out to eat for this animal right now, what it is ready to eat or what its diet might look like, or really what you're checking is how strong is its bite. That, I should say, is what you're really actually looking at. Partially by where that condyle is, that joint at the back. You can feel it in your own. Put your hand right here and move your jaw. Find the spot where it hinges, right? That's the condyle. That's the joint for your mandible, your lower jaw. And on an animal like this is a dog because it has a big carnassial. Remember that big tooth we talked about right at the beginning that God gave him for grinding up bone? On an animal like a dog, the teeth are right in line with a joint or a condyle that's low on the back of that jawbone. That means it has the most leverage pulling up here with a muscle because of where that joint is, right? If it's way up here, it has less leverage. It's like using a hammer to pull out a nail with a real big handle. The bigger the handle on your crowbar or your hammer, the more easy it is to pull that nail, right? The more force you can exert without using as much yourself. You still have to do basically the same amount of work. You just have to pull a little lighter but a little farther when you're way out there, right? That's how that sort of a simple machine works with a lever. Well, it applies to animal jaws. This one right here is a deer. Same with that elk. The teeth would come back, but there's no condyle here. It's way up here, right? Giving you very little. So it's kind of like out here, these teeth actually have more leverage than in the part that has the muscle on it. So they can attach the muscle down here and pull straight up and down, but they don't have that leverage working. So an animal like a deer is probably an herbivore. It has a jaw that's very flexible and can grind food, but it can't yank real hard to get a lot of force on that jaw, right? It doesn't have the leverage working for it that an animal like a dog has. Then the most extreme example is this. This is a cute bunny rabbit. Well, was. So, right, this giant jaw, which is loosely modeled after a cougar jaw, believe it or not. And with it, I have a condyle, right? And we're going to experiment with the placement of this condyle in different places. First off, let's put it up high like, you know, an elk or a deer or a rabbit. A rabbit would actually be way up here. I don't even have that option. But let's put it up here like an elk or a deer, an herbivore would have. And we're going to set it up high on our stand. Okay. And then I'm going to need some volunteers. Come on up. Stan's going to take us at the beginning here. If you could, sir, grab this and try to lift that jaw there. Now, you're pretty strong, so you might be able to do it. Nope. Oh, barely. You're kind of lifting the whole thing. Hang on, try it again. He can get it. He's using two hands and pulling kind of hard. Can you do it with just one finger? One set of fingers? Here we go. I don't think so. So he can do that with both hands, right? But with just one finger, probably not as well. Now, if I move it down a bit, now I know this is going to be good. We're going to try to get this to where he can use just one finger to wrap around that rope. Thank you. This one is going to be in the middle. This is like an omnivore, right? So up here we got the herbivore spot. Right here we've got the omnivore spot, and at the bottom is the carnivore spot. Okay, give that a go. See if it got easier. Oh. Well, you aren't even breaking a sweat now. Try just one hand. Can you do just two fingers? Not yet? Okay. Here we go. We're going to move it down now to where a carnivore, dog or cat, something like that, would place this joint, this hinge really. Now, okay, give it a go. Well, that's just cheating. Well, now you got it stuck, you pulled so hard. One hand, two fingers. So easy, he couldn't even come close to that before. Okay, now we need a brave soul who's willing to risk their very neck. Come on, people, this is the exciting grand finale. Come on up. Okay, here's what's going to happen. Hang on, Stan, don't pull that up just yet. You'll hurt somebody. Okay, we're going to put this seat right here. And what you're going to do is, just for the sake of having more fun with the audience, we're going to turn you so you face them a little bit. Okay. And then you're going to come back this way, sir. We're going to turn that so we don't destroy it. Okay, what you're going to do is this. You're going to be particularly brave and sit like this and hold on to this right here, okay? You can keep your feet out here to kind of steady yourself so you don't just like completely tip over. And then maybe we need, how about if we grab like all the kids right here in the front row? Front two rows, come on up. Come on up. You're going to come back here and you're going to help out Stan. Now, I don't want you to launch him to the moon. You got that? We aren't sending him into orbit. You going to come up and help? They might need your help. Okay, any other kids who want to come up here and join? Get up here, quick. Here we go. Are you regretting this choice yet? Okay, good. I wasn't sure if you were kind of bent over. I wasn't sure if you were praying or what was going on there. Okay, you got it? Everyone grab onto this rope. And now, like I said, don't pull so hard that you send him through the roof, okay? 1, 2, 3. Wow! Again, that was fun. Woo! Look at him go. Oh! Well, I didn't mean send him through the floor either. You okay?
Yeah, at least it wasn't the moon.
Good job. So you can see, moving the condyle, thank you everybody, you can have a seat. Moving the condyle really matters as to how strong the bite is on a jaw, right? A really simple example of that, but it's a relatively simple concept, but it sure means a lot to those critters, so that God was able to do that. Great. Okay. Did you want to do a question and answer time, or what are you hoping for?
Yes, please.
Awesome.
And one question to start off with,